Our first tipping point tonight, identity politics from the left. This is probably the clearest example of modern liberalism in a nutshell that I've seen in a while. The vice president of diversity at Apple was forced to apologize for suggesting that diversity of thought was important too, instead of just diversity of skin color. But doesn't relegating diversity to merely race or skin color victimize minorities by telling them they are nothing other than the color of their skin? There are 2 points to be made here. First of all, this is identity politics. This is modern progressive philosophy. This is the Democratic Party. That should scare us. Clearly, we don't live in a world where the content of our character is our defining identity. We live in a warped, liberal world where our skin color is the only factor that defines us. Second of all, stereotyping people by the color of their skin or their race actually victimizes minorities by telling them you are nothing other than the color of your skin. Your worth is because of what you look like, not how hard you've studied, or the choices you've made, or the hardships you've weathered, or your intelligence, or who you are, or what you hope to achieve. While liberals pretend to champion minorities, this behavior, forcing Apple's vice president of diversity to apologize for not playing identity politics, this shows us the truth. Listen to her comments.
Denise Young-Smith, Apple's new vice president of diversity and inclusion, doesn't believe being a minority or a woman are the only criteria for diversity. There can be 12 white, blue-eyed, blonde men in a room, and they're going to be diverse, too, because they're going to bring a different life experience and life perspective to the conversation. Young-Smith said.
Joining me now, host of the Andrea K radio show, Andrea K, and Democratic strategist Kevin Walling. Andrea, Kevin, happy Monday.
Hey guys, good to be with you.
Happy Monday, Liz. Good to see you, Andrea.
All right, Kevin, let me start with you. This is quite the story. I loved reading this story. It's actually not getting a lot of coverage, which surprises me because it is such a perfect example of identity politics here. But Kevin, let me ask you, if we're not defining diversity as inclusive of diversity of thought, if it's merely what you look like, the color of your skin, or your race, doesn't relegating diversity to merely race or skin color, doesn't that actually victimize minorities by telling them that really you're not looked at for anything other than the color of your skin?
Absolutely not, Liz. You know, Silicon Valley employs 24% of their workforce is women. Even less are minority employees. Ms. Young-Smith's remarks are off base in terms of her comparing diversity of thought, which is a made-up term, to actually important diversity issues to make sure that we have diverse voices and faces around a board table in conversation here. If we had the same demographics as they do in Silicon Valley, one of you two women would be off this panel because there would only be one of you in terms of the views in Silicon Valley. So they have a lot to do in terms of the tech sector for making it more apparent for what America actually looks like for their products.
And Andrea, let me pivot to you, because what he's saying essentially is that just your face, it just matters what your face looks like. It doesn't matter what you have to bring to the table. If I'm sitting here with a boardroom of people at a tech company in Silicon Valley, I want people who are going to make my product, make my company the best. I don't care what they look like here. And essentially what Apple's doing is contradicting the idea that the content of your character and your experience is the most important. They're saying it's just purely your appearance, your image that makes you valuable or not valuable.
Absolutely, and Kevin just basically reiterated your point in your opening statement, which is how narrow the definition of diversity is for the left, of which this VP of diversity, you kind of got to laugh at the fact that you've got an African-American woman who should be checking two of the boxes of diversity, who got a smackdown. She got a lesson from the left that liberalism is where liberty goes to die, especially when you dare to speak an opposing view. See, the big story here is not just that it's more a pushing identity politics game. We all know that it's racist and demeaning and paternalistic, and it's not just about race. Remember, President Obama had the life of Julia, which I found to be incredibly demeaning, as though I have to be carried through my life by a government. But it's also the fact that you're not allowed to express an opposing view. And if you do, you're going to be met with the Antifa forces anti-First Amendment. And imagine if this African-American woman had been forced to apologize in order to appease conservatives. We'd have Al Sharpton marching in the streets saying she was being oppressed. And you know what? He would be right about that statement.
All right, Kevin, let me phrase it this way. The irony here is not lost on me for the reason that Andrea said, but also because the title of this woman's job is the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion, but her own opinions aren't included in her job responsibility, which to me, like I said, is the epitome of irony here. But isn't this idea that we choose someone based off of their race or based off of their gender, isn't that the dictionary definition of stereotyping?
Absolutely not. You know, race and gender encompasses how people view the world, how they're treated from the moment they're born, their education, their experiences growing up. Diversity of thought is a made-up topic and idea in this conversation. What I am saying and what I think reasonable people are saying throughout this process is it's important to have a diverse room of people no matter what when it's deciding policy. You know, I'll note that Trump's White House is the whitest and malest cabinet in 6 presidencies. So Ronald Reagan had more diverse views around the room, not just women, not just minorities, but in terms of different opinions around that room than Donald Trump 30 years later. There is something to be said for having people, both gender equity, racial equity, in terms of business settings, in terms of this kind of conversation that's going on in America, in terms of government situations.
Wait a second. Kevin, let me interrupt you just for a second here, because I want to make sure that I get this straight. Because when you're talking about diversity, I agree with you that people from different backgrounds bring different value to the table, and that there is a lot of value in having a diverse group of opinions. I just don't understand the correlation between opinion and skin color. And let me give you an example here. If you have a white man who grew up in Manhattan, in New York City, coming from a multi-million-dollar family, does that person have the same thought process, opinions, perspective, and experience as a white man who grew up in poverty in Appalachia to a single mom and experienced government welfare and rampant drug abuse in his family? Do they have the same, even if they're the same age and they aspire to the same job, do they have the same perspective and opinion simply because both of them have white skin?
Sure, the conversation is, Liz, those two white men, when they're in a room, are viewed similarly in terms of how they're treated under the law and in terms of perceptions in corporate America, in the government, what have you. Two white men are viewed similarly in terms of how they approach their views, their understanding, and how the society views them.
If I may jump in here, because
what I'm saying,
I disagree with you, Kevin.
and Liz,
No.
is that it's important to have that diversity in and around a room.
No, that's
not
not
just,
what you're
of
saying.
course,
Andrea, wait just a second. Kevin, no, what you're saying is that it is the color of their skin that makes the difference. You're saying that you view them exactly the same because they both share the same skin color. No, that was your words. You said they are viewed exactly the same, which means you are viewing them exactly the same.
Equal access to that table. Then Liz, why is Silicon
Let me jump
Valley
in here
only
because
employ
as
1
somebody,
in 4
I have
women?
to address.
Why
Go
are
ahead,
women
Andrea,
only 1 in
go
4
ahead.
jobs
Yeah, I
in
have to
Silicon
address
Valley
Kevin's
if their
assertion
opinions
about
aren't
corporate
valued?
America because I'm somebody that worked in corporate America. I'm somebody that did hiring and firing in corporate America. And I can tell you that at one Fortune 20 company I worked at, the ongoing joke was, what's an endangered species? A white male at work in corporate America. They almost can't get promoted because of this push.
Even though the Fortune
Kevin, let me
500
finish.
CEOs,
Let me
Andrea.
finish,
I don't
please.
think it's
Even though they
non-white
were
men
the
running
right,
these companies.
what we should be striving for equality in this country, particularly in the workplace, should be choosing people on the basis of their work experience, basis of their education, who is the best person for the job, and that should have absolutely nothing to do with their skin color or their gender. Equality that is not based.
Andrea, then I'm sure you're full for fully funding inner city schools that educate young African Americans.
Why are we going? What does that have to do with education? What does that have to do with what we're talking about here? And I can tell you, that when I worked in corporate America, some of the most successful people that I worked with, some of the most successful people I worked with in corporate America.
All right, guys, listen, we're out of time here. But the point of the matter is, Kevin, when you make the point about inner city schools, that should be because those are low-funded schools, not because the children who attend that school have black skin. It should be about the experience and the perspective, the socioeconomic status, and the content of people's characters, not about the color of their skin. I think this, and I mean, this conversation is illustrative of the point I made in the introduction that liberals play identity politics. They don't care about people as individuals. They care only about their physical characteristics, and that's shocking. That's something we should hold liberals accountable for.
Right,
and we do have to go though.
Opportunity for everybody.
We do have to go. We'll talk to you both next week. Thanks for being here.
Okay.